Hi, and welcome to the last of our endocrine and exercise video lectures. We're going to cover three different glands and some hormones here with this lecture. They are not totally unrelated from one another, but we'll generally look at the pancreas mostly by itself, then the thyroid and parathyroid hormone, or gland, sorry. So with our pancreas, what we have is the gland that's primarily responsible for glucose levels, blood glucose levels in our system. Okay, and it does it through primarily two, although three hormones in particular. So we have certain cells in our pancreas called beta cells, and they secrete insulin. So when we get insulin into our blood, it will bring glucose into the cell. That's how I kind of remember it. Insulin into the cell. So that comes from our beta cells. Alpha cells, they secrete something called glucagon. And the way I think of it is glucose gone. So it releases glucose from the cell into the bloodstream. And then the third type of cells is delta cells, and it releases somatostatin. And the interesting thing about this is it will actually stop the release of insulin and glucagon, and we'll kind of hold neutral our levels of insulin and glucose there. We have PP or pancreatic polypeptides cells, and they decrease pancreatic juices. So that's more of the digestive side of the pancreas, which has a dual function between systems. And last but not least, we can know, or we need to understand, that exercise decreases insulin and increases glucose in the blood. So for example, if you had a continuous glucose monitor, so you might have seen people with like a little round or somewhat oval-like device on the back of their arms. Typically, although sometimes it's used just by the general population for diet and nutrition now, but generally speaking, people with those devices will have diabetes, and they manage their blood glucose levels by artificially injecting insulin when their blood glucose levels get too high, if their beta cells aren't producing enough naturally. So, but sorry, I digress. So when we're exercising, we'll see an increase in blood glucose, and that's a good thing. So we'll see lower insulin and higher glucagon, because we want to release more glucose into the bloodstream so it's readily available for our working muscles. Okay. And if we look at this schematic here, this just kind of helps illustrate that balancing act that occurs between high blood glucose, normal levels, or low blood glucose, and the release of glucagon when it's low to increase the blood glucose, or if we have high levels of glucose in the blood, our release of insulin, which will then bring glucose for storage or use, and we'll return to normal levels again. So this is kind of like a feedback system, right? Again, cropping up here for us. So the next gland we're looking at is our thyroid gland. We've spoken before in a previous lecture about T3 and T4, and so some of the differences between them. T3 primarily being the form that acts at the cell level. We mentioned iodine and how in table salt we get this, and to help synthesize these hormones. But specifically, we went into a little bit, but not a lot of detail on these, but they increase our basal metabolic rate, so just our resting heart rate. And again, if we get hyperthyroidism, there's something called Graves' disease, and it really, truly, like, people tend to lean out because, again, their basal metabolic rate is, but so to a point where they're, like, behaviorally, they tend to be a little anxious, and so it's not suggested that people, in order to manage their weight, take supplemental thyroid hormone. because of the side effects. But I digress. It also aids in protein synthesis, increases the effects of epinephrine, and that does it in a synergistically way, um, and helps aid in growth and development of cells. So, again, during periods of like puberty, we'll see an increased rate of that. And obviously, with epinephrine and high levels of intense exercise, we'll want some more thyroid hormones flying around. Parathyroid hormone is a little bit unique and derivative from all the other, from some of the hormones that have a more direct relationship on exercise. Primarily, it just has three main influences: our bones, kidneys, and intestines. Now, obviously, we need a good, strong skeletal system to have anchors for our muscles to be able to move our bodies around. But if we just kind of think for a moment why higher intensity exercise might also increase parathyroid hormone, we might not be so surprised, because part of what PTH does is stimulates concentrations of calcium in blood. So why would that be important for exercise or working muscles? Well, if you remember back to when we were looking at skeletal muscle, you can recall that increased calcium levels in the blood, calcium in particular, is useful for muscular contraction, right? It's part of the process that we need in order to allow the sliding filament theory to occur. So, so in order to get nice, strong muscular contractions, we just need some more calcium around. So, parathyroid hormone. Okay, and that is all. Happy studies.